Well, welcome to Did She Really Say That? A podcast that is shaking up the world of what it means to be a female entrepreneur. And today's guest, I'm super excited for because it's not our typical episode, but this is critical training. It's the transition and the growth process that many of us women experience and grow through actually grow through when it comes to moving from career into entrepreneurship. And I love what Alex brings to this episode because it doesn't seem like a common conversation when you go from being in the field, and so we're talking medical profession, and then transitioning into a technical writer. And I've met quite a few technical writers over the years, and this is a specialty. And actually, we need more women in this arena. And I know Alex is going to explain why, because we bring something about connection and purpose when we start bringing our expertise and then using that as the next generation training platform. So, who is Alexandra Howson? She has a PhD, a CHCP, an ERYT. Oh, there's a lot of lingo there. Is a writer, researcher, and educator. She hosts the Right Medicine. I love this. The Right Medicine, WRITE, for those that were asking, Right Medicine podcast, and recently published the Right CME Roadmap, How to Thrive in CME with No Experience, No Network, and No Clue. Tilt Publishing. She runs the Right CME Pro, a professional development program that teaches medical writers how to launch and grow a sustainable CME writing business. There's a lot going on in there, Alex. So, welcome to our podcast in this episode. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Chef Katrina.
Yeah, I love this because it is, when we were chatting about having you on as this episode, what I loved about this is like it's been your journey and transition. So can you talk just a little bit about how you kind of got into this field? Like was it something you always knew you were going to be? Was a technical writer, somebody that got into helping train the next generation or update training, because that's a key element, especially in the medical field.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, I didn't always imagine I'd be in this field. Nobody wakes up and decides that they're going to work in continuing medical education. It's a very subterranean niche. Um, Health professionals, obviously they get access to undergraduate training in nursing school, dentistry school, pharmacy school, medical school. And then they are expected to continue that training, and many of them do so in grad school, fellowships, residencies, all these kinds of things. But then after that, they have to continue their education. And every state in the United States mandates the number of continuing education credits they have to acquire every year. And there's a whole field of professionals involved in developing that continuing education content. So, but unless you work in healthcare, you're not likely to be very familiar with this field. So, as most people will say in this field, I stumbled into it, although I'm not sure how many accidents there really are in the world, and we can talk about that because I do believe that your prior expertise,
Mm.
creates paths that take you toward particular types of work. I initially trained as a nurse. I was a trauma operating room nurse for many years, and then I was an academic in sociology. I taught and conducted research on women's health and gender, the body, and society. I've written books on that. And then 2004, we actually moved from the UK to the US, and all of a sudden I found that I had no academic network. And
Mm.
finding an academic job is really tricky unless you have a network, like many professional forms of work. And I very half-heartedly looked for an academic job. And in retrospect, what I found was I was ready to make a shift into something else that was more aligned with where I was at that point in my life, my energy, my availability, and my skills. And so I kind of took inventory of my skills teaching, research, writing, and try to figure out how to find work
Mm.
rather than jobs that would allow me to use those skills. And in that process, over about 18 months to 2 years, I found medical writing, which is a very large umbrella. You described it as technical writing. Technical writing can be very different actually from medical writing
Yeah,
because
okay.
technical writing is often focused on procedural information, the manual, when you get your IKEA chest of drawers and you get that little booklet, that's technical writing.
Yeah, I have
Um,
a guy that does technical writing for the auto industry. So he teaches
exactly.
the
Yeah.
back end, like how to put together a car for like their employees kind of a thing. That's technical writing. Okay, so thank you for the differential because I was not aware of it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I thought that, they bear a close family
Okay.
resemblance because often you are describing, procedures in medical writing, depending on who your audience is. But medical
Mm.
writing is a huge kind of umbrella that includes patient education, clinical education, regulatory documents if for pharmaceutical companies that are submitting clinical trial information to the Food and Drug Administration.
So
Uh,
fascinating.
yeah, science writing for manuscripts. There's a whole lot of different things going on. I'm very niche focused and really
Okay.
stick to continuing education. So that is how I found continuing education, continuing medical education, continuing professional development, continuing education for health professionals. There are so many acronyms in this
Mm.
field, it can be a little challenging once people do find it and think, oh, this sounds interesting. How can I be part of this? So yeah.
So, no, but what interests me, I think I'm going to pull back on this thread back up a little bit. So, the one thing you said is like when you moved over here to the US and you talk about, you looked at all your skills
Yeah.
and just kind of like, let's talk a little bit about that because I think a lot of time as women, we don't sit back and look at like all the skill sets that we acquire
Oh yeah.
over the course of different professions, different things that we take on. I know when we previously talked, as a skill set, if you're a mom, you've got a whole nother skill set that you've added into this that you might not even think plays into the world of business, plays into the world of doing this. So what was it like to sit back and just kind of go through that process of evaluating your skills and why is that such a critical piece that majority of us miss but is really important?
I do think it's really important, and it's become more important, as my own business has
Mm.
evolved. Like I've been an independent medical writer now for almost 20 years. Um, I think I think it does a number of things. One is when I talked about leaving a profession behind. When you step out of your professional context, whether so I'll back up there. Most of the people I work with are, they've been healthcare professionals, clinicians, academics, researchers, journalists. These are all professional occupations. When you enter a profession, you spend years, in some cases, decades, being socialized into that professional
Mm.
identity. It becomes a very core part of who you are. And when you step outside of that, in the case of my field, I work with people who are looking for more autonomy in their work. They are looking for ways to use their professional expertise without all the things that come with working for an organization or an
Mm.
institution.
I
But
got
when
that.
you step out of that organization or institution, you really start to question your professional identity. Who am I without all these trappings,
Yeah.
without the daily contact with my peers, without that reinforcement through conversations, all the kind of little status symbols that come with, professional identity. And so I think that starting to do the work of identifying what lies at the core of that identity is really important. And a lot of what lies at the core are skills.
Mm.
The things that you do, that you apply on an everyday basis to do your job, whether it's as an academic or a researcher or a nurse. And so, yeah, I do think that doing some kind of skills inventory, and there are lots of different tools out there to support the process. I probably started with a SWOT analysis. I can't really remember now. Personally, I feel it's useful. It's kind of clunky,
It is.
um,
I agree.
but it's a really helpful way to start
Mm.
parsing, teasing apart all of the different things that make you you and make you able to do um, work in the world. And you said it, it's not just the things that come with the professional identity, it's also the things that you use to manage your daily life, manage your
Yeah.
family, manage your emotions. You mentioned the ERYT at the end of my name. I'm an experienced registered yoga teacher. And so that kind of nervous system regulation, managing your emotions, is something that I see is increasingly important as part of not only skills inventory, but developing skills to manage in the moment. So um, I think skills inventory plays a really critical role in supporting that professional identity transition and
Yes.
giving you the information that you need to start making decisions about how you want to move forward. I also think it's that when you mentioned clarity at the beginning of our conversation, when you're clear about what your skills are, you can see what your deficits are and
Yeah.
start to think about where do I need to pull in support to fill that gap? What do I need to do to level up in order to meet that gap? Is that gap something that is even important in relation to the work that I'm doing right now? So that's the kind of second reason why doing a skills inventory, not just once, but maybe a
Over and
couple of
over
times
again.
a year, maybe once
Yeah.
a quarter, whatever works for your cadence
Yeah.
is really helpful.
One of the questions I have for those of our listeners that might be listening and they don't know what a SWOT analysis is. So I know it is strength. So you're doing a strength analysis, a weakness analysis. Um,
Attitude, I think. I could be wrong about that.
what
I'm going
was
to
it?
Google it right now because I can't actually remember. No,
I
it's
think
not.
I know there's like, and then it's like opportunities. So it's strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. That's actually what it is, like a threat
Excellent.
or competition. Like who would be your competition around it? Which I always, like you said, it is clunky in terms of what this is. And when you take out that threat piece, that competition piece, because
Mm,
I really think you can lay that down on the table when you do your self-analysis, look
yeah.
at your strengths, look at your weaknesses, and then look at opportunities as a way to ask yourself, where can I help people with what I'm learning about myself? And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of like the call in the conversation. Now, moving this kind of along into the next piece, I know one of the things that really had us connect is that you do focus in on helping women in business. There's
Yes.
a huge need for women to really learn from other women in business. And so you're helping women really embrace this continual medical education writing platform. So, how are you helping them structure their business to align with their energy? Like we talk about this all the time, like women have a different flow energetically than our male counterparts do. So, how do you kind of structure this for women that are coming into this, coming out of that professional career, stepping into this? Like, what does that look like? What does that structure look like?
So I'll talk about structure in a couple of different ways.
Okay.
One is I do run a program called Right See Me Pro, which has a curriculum as part of that.
Okay.
And so when folks come into the program, we work through the curriculum together. We have 8 weeks of online coaching together. We have mentors who work individually with our members and a very vibrant community that participants, members, can really get involved
I love that.
with as part of the curriculum and that initial curriculum and coaching, we have a very thorough workbook. We're very invested in implementation. So yes, we have didactic teaching, we have coaching, but we also have, here are the steps that you need to take, and here's how you can take them.
Mm. Okay.
And as part of that implementation, we focus on things like, skills inventory, but using that to then map onto what the field of continuing education needs. So we
Okay.
look at who the providers are, the education providers, the potential clients, because this is a very freelance friendly field.
Good to know.
We look at who your clients are, how they work, what kind of needs they have for writers. We look at, we then use that skills inventory information to identify, okay, well, these are all the things I can do. What do I really want to do?
Mm.
What do I need my business to do for me? And that phrasing, I think, is really important. And I learned that from Elise Bennon, who is also known as Marketing Mentor. I've been working with Elise for over a decade. Um, what do I want my business to do for me? And how can I make sure that what I'm offering clients is also working for me? So we do a lot of work on that.
Okay.
But it's never a one and done. In our conversations, in our discussions, in our community, that is one of the things that kind of comes up again and again, because we see it in questions like, how much should I charge? Why is this client doing this? In all the engagement and relationships with clients. And I think at the core of that is often this anxiety about, there's a standard
Mm.
and a normal way to conduct business as a freelance writing business owner. There's a way of the world. There's something I should be doing.
Yes.
And we try to kind of take a step back from that and really go back to, well, here are your skills. Here are the things you want to focus your offerings and your services on to help the people in your business ecosystem. How can we answer those questions using that information? The productivity trap is something that comes up again and again. And one of my favorite books is actually I Didn't Do the Thing Today by Madeline Dorr. I don't know if you're familiar with that, or your listeners are familiar with that, but it's a very clear call to focus on nourishment and nurturing and fecundity in a broad sense,
Right.
growth versus productivity. And so we really try to lean into that. But I have to tell you, it's very hard. If you have come from a profession, you are driven. You are taught to be driven. You might be a firstborn child. You're already kind of A-type, you know. So there's a lot of relearning for
Yeah.
folks
It's a
there.
lot of rewiring and reprogramming, especially stepping into this space, right? And one of the things that, we've talked about in our previous conversations is that as a woman, it's always evolving for us, right? Learning how our energy cycle works, learning how
Yeah,
to balance the demand of this freelancing, right? Because there's some respects as a freelancer, there's this I can create my own hours, and yet at the same time, you're still at the effect of the deadline that is been set in terms of doing that project.
yeah.
So, how do you balance that? How do you look at, okay, where am I taking time to rest? Where am I taking time to settle my mind? Because the creativity process, I mean, it is a creative process.
It is.
And so I know as a woman, if even for me, there are certain times of the month where I'm really creative, and certain times of the month I'm like, there's nothing there. Like you're pulling from an empty cup, right?
Yeah.
So how do you kind of work through that as you're working with these companies and these projects that you've got to finish?
Me personally, well, that's always a work in progress.
Okay. Any tips
I'm
that you can share around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are kind of physical, emotional, and social things that you can do. And to be clear, I'm in postmenopause,
Okay.
so I am beyond those fluctuations that can be so challenging for many of us, and beyond the sort of, peri to postmenopause train wreck
Right.
um, that
Noted.
can also be really, yeah, that can be really challenging. So I've learned sort of different things at different times. I think the first, if we take kind of physical things in the first instance, if you're doing any sedentary work and you're doing any kind of keyboard work, which most women who are business owners are doing in one way or another, get your physical space sorted.
Okay.
You really pay attention to those kind of ergonomics, your chair, your desk height, get a standing desk, optimize your keyboard, all of those things, which we tend not to do because we tend not to look after ourselves. So I think that's,
Guilty.
yeah, no, absolutely. I
Yeah.
moved to a standing desk about a decade ago and have never looked back. It's been great for my back, and also you move more. So that's the second thing is how can you find ways to introduce movement snacks
Mm.
into your working day? I mean, I like to start with movement because it just gets everything going, but then I want to keep moving. So that could be just going to make yourself a cup of tea, take the dog out, whatever. Go and put a pile of laundry on. Whatever gets your body moving on a fairly regular basis, including your
Okay.
eyes, by the way. So making sure that you take those breaks from the
White light.
monitor.
Yeah, the blue
Yeah,
light and everything else that reflects back, which is, yeah.
exactly, exactly. And then, sort of nourishment and hydration. So that's really baseline stuff in terms of, when it comes to physical
No,
recommendations, but they're worth repeating because
we
I think what we
forget.
tend to do is, oh yes, of course that's important. And then we do nothing about them. But I promise you, if you optimize those things, they will help you just slow down a little bit.
Okay.
I think the second thing, and we're scared of that because when we do, then, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be as productive as I need to be. I'm not going to meet those deadlines, but you will because you'll have
You
better
refresh.
energy.
Yeah.
You'll have better energy. The second thing is emotional regulation. Client engagement and relationships with clients as business owners, as freelancers, as solopreneurs, as independent contractors, whatever language we're using is very challenging. And it's only getting more challenging because our clients are nearing burnout as well.
Ooh, yeah.
And so they kind of need us to pick up an awful lot of slack.
Mm.
They need us to work with them, in a kind of straightforward, easy way. But that's emotional labor. Arlie Hochschild was one of the first writers to write about this way back in the 1980s. Um, but it is emotional labor. And so we need to do some kind of practice so that we can build awareness of our own bodily responses and emotional responses to what's going on. Often those
Mm.
responses show up physiologically, headaches, gut issues, sore hips, sore knees, sore shoulders, all of those things. That could be physical too, but often it's a physiological response to emotional challenges that come
Okay.
cyclically every day in the course of working solo. So
Yeah.
taking a different kind of snack, just taking a breathing snack,
Mm.
taking a few moments to let your feet, I mean, do it now. Just let your feet rest on the floor. Let your sits bones be really heavy in the seat. And whoever is listening there, let your shoulders just relax away from your ears and start to pay attention to your breath, the
Mm.
temperature at your nostrils as the air hits your nose, that sense of air washing over your throat, the move where you're feeling your breath in your body. You could do that for 3 to 5 minutes and feel a little bit reset. And of course, there are a whole bunch of
Okay.
other breathing practices or body scans that you can do to help you regulate your your physiology and your nervous system on a regular basis. And the more you do that, the easier it is to do it in the moment when you have that client in front of you or in an email who is, demanding or being short or terse or, whatever those things are. So I do think having some kind of nervous system regulation practices can be really helpful, and they don't have to be complicated, but they are a practice. And then the third thing is social. If you run a business from home in particular, then you're probably spending a lot of time on your own. Um, or you're getting a lot of interruptions from the other people in your household who don't understand what you're doing, or you don't have a space to really do your work
Mm.
in quiet, and you have to go into public settings. So creating kind of buffer zones, boundaries, can really help to manage that social piece, either to bring more social into your work or to, kind of keep the social out a little bit, at least long enough to get some work done.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I do find, especially amongst women, is that collaboration with us is really kind of key, at least for myself. Like I can be, working from home, doing my own thing, but there is a sense of getting out and talking to,
Yeah,
like you've got the community that you talked about. It's like an engaging community, a place where you can kind of talk about, the clients you're working with, the projects you're working on, how it all goes. And I think, even in that is a respect of like, just making space for that. But and that's a big piece of it, especially when we start, like I found myself connecting to a lot of online communities just to have a place to go and,
absolutely.
chat with them. But I do find myself wanting that physical contact and being in those spaces also, because there's a synergy or an energy that kind of works off when you meet people that aren't necessarily in your profession, but you can be inspired. You can get more creative around that. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a physiological response to that as well. Kind of your body has chemical changes when you are kind of interacting, in person
Yeah.
with people. And so I agree. I think it's really important.
So one of the fascinating things about you, what I love too, is that, you're teaching how to get into this medical writing industry, right? As a freelancer.
Yep.
And yet you're also a yoga instructor. So like there's this blend of, right? And this is where I want women that are listening to this episode to really kind of get this, that it's not an either or. There's a lot for us women that can blend things together, that can have different things that are part of the whole, right? And so talk to us a little bit how you got into the yoga, and how do you even use that
Mm.
inside of, helping and teaching how to become a medical writer? Like, I'm curious.
Oh, well, I love that you asked that question. So I got into yoga the way that a lot of people get into yoga, which is as a kind of fitness
Mm,
activity. And probably about 20 years ago. So I'd been doing it for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then that whole kind of perimenopause machine started cranking up, and my hormones were fluctuating, and I was tired. I was, well, all the things. Um, I started to notice at that point, yeah, yoga is really helpful. I don't think it's the physical thing. I think it's the breathing.
mm.
I'm really noticing a difference in my sleep, my mental awareness, and just my overall kind of emotional, like I feel a bit better.
Kind of regulating yourself.
Exactly, exactly. So from there, I studied, I did teacher training. I've been teaching since 2018. And for women in midlife, um, I see huge benefits of a regular yoga practice. Yes, the movement is important, but really the important thing is rest.
Mm,
Rest and using yoga tools, mindfulness, meditation, breathing, stillness, quietness, to really get to know yourself
mm,
and really get to know your body and really get a keen sense of what it is you need in your life. Because I think that's, I've been that I was the firstborn. I've been that type A professional person who's gone full tilt for a very, very long time without really stopping to question too much.
Hmm.
Is this the right path? Should I be doing this? Because once you're in it, you're really invested. You've got mortgages, children, all those things. You kind of keep going. So my personal experience with yoga was has been, still is really positive. And as I began building my professional development program, I wanted to be able to share some of those tools with medical writers who live in their heads. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a highly intellectual um, endeavor because you're translating often very complex clinical information into something that a nurse can read in 10 minutes
Mm.
and use, in the clinical context. And so it takes a lot of intellectual capacity that is physically draining. And then when we look at the point in life when women in particular make those transitions out of professional careers and want to be more autonomous, it's in midlife. So they're caregivers. They've got kids, they've got older parents, they're probably in the perimenopause transition. They've got a lot going on. And
Yes.
so I wanted to kind of pull those tools into the professional development program that I run so that people could see you don't have to hustle all the time. You can take care of yourself. Here's how you can do that. And also build a business that sustains you and kind of gives you some of the things that you're looking for in your life, including revenue, because at the end of the day, we have to make a buck.
Yep. Agree.
Um, so so well-being is a pillar of my business. We do that in different ways. We do that in kind of designing the calendar around energy flows. Time for creation, time for deep work, time for rest. We argue against an always on productivity mindset.
Thank you.
We encourage members to be aware of not only their own rhythms, whether we're talking about bodily or emotional rhythms, but also their clients' rhythms. There's a
Mm.
rhythm to the calendar year in terms of, in our field in particular, when clients are, uh, you really need a lot of support, and other times when they don't. We encourage members to get some clarity on what those rhythms are for their clients so that they can build their business calendar in response to that, and be aware of when they might need more energy at
Yeah.
certain times of the year than others. And we really try to encourage members to focus on building systems that are sustainable, whether we're talking about their marketing, their approach to marketing, their approach to client engagement, their approach to research, and actually, delivering the
Good.
the the actual project to clients. So, there's a lot of different ways where we bring that focus on well-being into the work that we're doing.
Okay. Well, and I love that you do that because, like, I'm hearing, and I know all of our listeners are hearing too, is like you're telling them it's okay to breathe. You're
A hundred
okay. You're
percent.
telling them that's like it's okay to breathe. It's okay to move. It's okay to take time off, ladies. It's okay to take time off. I
Yeah,
love how you talk about know your energy flow, but also know your clients. Like, really be in communication with them, understand what they want to achieve at the end of working with you, and then be like, okay, how do I make this like as seamless as possible, but also making sure I'm staying in my energy. And I love the little things you talk about. Breath is so important. I think we neglect it so much.
we do.
Movement is key. Like, ladies, we got to get up and move. I always joke with my team. I said, your hips go left to right and all the way around too. Like, you can move the whole thing while you're sitting there.
Get a hula
Um,
hoop.
Yes, I say go hula hoop at your desk or something. So, even for me, in terms of what we do with our business is just really getting back into not just being so focused on what the end goal is, but what's the
Yeah.
journey you're on in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think it's a great
I
way to put it.
yeah, and because this is, I mean, you're talking about um so much with like it's just the blend of it together. I think that's what fascinated me around our conversation is how you're blending it together instead of being a this or that kind of a thing.
Mm.
And we look at, how women are redesigning the world of business for each other and saying it doesn't have to be all productivity. It can be, and it can look like this.
Yeah, I think that's a really important shift. In our field, and probably more generally, there is this idea that the six-figure salary is what everybody is aiming for, and the multi-six-figure family salary. Of course, if you're in business, you got to generate a lot more. If you're looking for a six-figure salary, then you have to generate a
A
lot of
lot more.
figures in your revenue to get to your salary.
Yeah,
When people come into independent slash freelance slash solopreneur work, they don't necessarily realize that. They think that what they earn is that's going in my pocket, and that's not the case. So there's also some fundamental kind of financial literacy that people have to learn, and I certainly did as well. And there are great
same.
tools and resources out there now, as for helping to people get a better understanding of what they need to do. But I also want to kind of take a step. So my point there is, on LinkedIn, which is where most of the people in medical writing
Mm.
hang out, you will see a lot of comments around, you can get to the six-figure salary. And I want to say, well, that might not be important for everybody. Um, there might be other metrics or other indicators that you can use to help you see that your business is successful in your terms and in relation to what you need. I'm interested. I do find it interesting that people find it very difficult to think about metrics and indicators that work for them.
Mm.
They don't all have to be numerical or linked to dollars. That can, so I'm not saying that's an either or, but I do think, looking at your return on energy investment,
That's a big
um,
one.
right?
Yeah, because you could have a client that you want to fire.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we teach in the program is that if you are getting that gut feeling about a client or a project and they've just come back to you with, another project and you're thinking, okay, something's making you hesitate about doing the estimate, about responding to the email, you really have to pay attention to that. Maybe it's just your energy where you are now. Maybe there's something about that client and the project type
Mhm.
that isn't a good fit for you right now. And if you're collecting data, and we really recommend that people collect data about the amount of time, energy they spend on clients and projects and tasks. If you look at the data, you'll be able to see, oh, yeah, this happened the last time round. I think I'm going to fire the client.
Yeah. Well, because there's so many times that, like, even over the last few years, when you get a client or working with, you kind of forget because I tell you right now, you don't know even what you did back in February of this year. There's probably a good gap in there.
Um,
So, like when you talk about collecting, data, just having something that you can look back on, I think that's key. I think awareness is key. I
Huge.
think tracking your energy is key. I think beyond just the dollars that are in your bank account,
Mhm.
there is so much. The quality of your life, right?
Yeah.
Is your quality of life where you want it to be? Is your relationships where you want it to be? Is your health where you want it to be? Look at the bigger picture, especially as women. It's not the dollars in the bank account that really drives majority of us because we're always looking at how does that impact or make a difference for others. the same time, you got to come back into yourself. And we started this whole conversation with self evaluation. What are your skill sets? Time, check yourself in terms of are you tracking in your overall happiness and
Exactly.
energy as you're building a business. I think that is really key also.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Um, and you've frozen, so I'm not
No,
sure.
we're good. We're
You're
back.
good. Okay, sorry. That's at 45:05, just in case you want to
Yep.
mark that.
I'll get a long little bleep on my editing thing that says that's wrong. So it usually triggers me for that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your program for those of you that are listening that you're kind of curious. Maybe Alex has said something you're like, maybe I'm ready for this transition. Maybe I want to, I'm curious about what it is she does. I'm curious about the program. I would love to become more of a writer. Maybe you have been in the medical profession. And I do know a lot of women that I've talked to that have transitioned out of medical profession into entrepreneurship are still kind of in that, you know, dangly space of not sure what they want to do. This could be the place for them to kind of find their home and still feel very centered moving forward, which is why I love having you here. So let's talk about how they can work with you and what that looks like.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, we have a lot of physicians, nurses, pharmacists, and dentists in our program. Just exactly as you described, people who are either thinking about stepping outside of clinical work, perhaps adding an additional kind of skill or side business to their clinical work. Continuing education is a great way to do that, not just as a writer, but as a peer reviewer, as a subject matter expert. There's lots of different ways that clinicians in particular can work in continuing education. We have a cohort of our accelerator program starting in September. That involves a pretty extensive curriculum, which is CPD certified by the CPD certification service. That includes an introduction to the CME, the continuing education ecosystem, what you need to know about this field in order to get started. We focus on skills and building those skills, how to write a needs assessment, a patient case, manuscript, how to think about your client engagement, invoicing, all those things as part of our business skill set, and how to build a business that works for you rather than you being a slave to
Mm.
the momentum of developing a business that can mean you're doing a lot of busy work, but not necessarily work that's bringing you what you need.
Yeah. Whether fulfillment or financial, like you can get stuck in a lot of the technical. I get a lot of
Oh yeah,
clients over the years that get bogged down in the technical. I'm like, okay, let's remove all of that and be like, what do you actually need to move forward? Because and a lot of times it could be you just networking, telling people what you do before you even have a website, and you could be getting clients that way. Like there's a
yeah,
lot of different ways to get started. So I love
absolutely.
so and the length of your program, I know we mentioned that earlier in the podcast episode.
Yeah, so when people join, they join for the whole year.
Okay.
The first 8 weeks are curriculum and coaching weekly, and then we have then people are able to participate in monthly events. So we have office hours every month. We have guest experts from the continuing medical education field who come and share their perspectives on different trends that are kind of ongoing in the field. We run quarterly sprints. As part of the program, we focus on building portfolio samples.
Mm.
So, after people have done the kind of first 8 to 12 weeks, then they start to think about working on those portfolio samples. They get written feedback from me. And so there's a lot of other different things going on over the course of the year that will help them implement what they've learned in those early weeks, build a solid portfolio, and begin to use the tools that we provide to build and map out their business structure and their business processes.
I
And of
love
course,
it.
there's a great community of people who are very vibrant and supportive. You know, you talked about collaboration a couple of times. This is a very supportive community, which consistently blows me away
Mm,
because people people post questions, other people respond. They're very generous with their own knowledge and expertise, and that's very beautiful to see.
agree. Well, what I love about this, and for everyone that's listening, there is, and I hope you take something from this, no matter what you're doing and where you're at in your life and your business and on your journey. But what I love about what Alex shares around like her program is that it's in 8 weeks just to get started, but it is a year long to develop, grow, get your clients, have the experience. Like you want that support, right? So many times we come across programs and trainings that are very short in terms of, what you have access to. And then you kind of feel like you're left hanging, like, now what do I do? Like that, I've had that experience. I've joined a lot of different masterminds and groups, and at the end of it, I'm like, now what kind of a thing. But I think with what you've created, not only do you have the ramp up, the support, the everything in the year long, but you have that community aspect that is often missing in terms of when we transition from one career and going down a journey to another. So thank you for really looking at holistically what your what people need, what women need, what men need as they come into this profession and say, okay, how do I make this work, and how is that weaving together in my life?
Absolutely. You know, isolation is a huge driver, has been a huge driver for me in terms of putting these resources together because you can't do your best work in isolation. You do need support. And I say that as a high functioning introvert who really needs a lot of alone time. But I know how energized I am after we've had a group event or we've been talking about something on our platform. We use Circle for our program and community. Um, and it's so much better than just throwing stuff out there onto LinkedIn and hoping that somebody's going to answer.
Yeah.
Because everyone who's in our community has not only their own but other people's interests at heart. So it works, and we keep working to iterate and make it as good as it can be for people.
I love that. So where can our listeners connect with you? So I know if you guys are interested in her course, the link is down below in the show notes. So definitely click on that, learn more about her. But where else can they connect with you? Just to follow along, just to kind of get to know a little bit more about you and what you're up to.
So I post on LinkedIn pretty much every day. That's
Okay.
just, LinkedIn /Alex Howson. I have a website, alexhowson.com. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about CME, I publish a weekly newsletter, Write CME Insider. That's alexhowson.kit. Well, we can put that in the
We'll
show
make sure that
notes.
that's in the show notes also. Got it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have a weekly podcast, Write Medicine, WRITE.
That is fantastic. Yes, and I love that. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and really helping, inside of this, like she did really say that in terms of she's challenging the norm. She's integrated wellness in terms of, entrepreneurship, freelancing, looking at how do you transition into different professions or bring on something like this, but still take care of yourself. And I love that journey that you shared with us. So thank you so much for being on with us here on Did She Really Say That? And the conversation that we have. I hope all you listeners out there, you connect with Alex, learn from her, and that you pulled something of value or saw something for yourself in this conversation. Because no matter where you're at in life, no matter what profession you're in, what Alex shared, there are elements of it that you can pull into your life right now. So thank you so much for being a guest here on our podcast today.
Katrina, thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a delight.
All right, ladies, connect, network, follow, and let's have some fun. We'll see you on our next episode.